China's murder for organs, live organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners exposed. For those in a hurry, here's a short summary of the topic. Hospitals in China admit to live organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. Hospitals across China have reportedly admitted to using live Falun Gong practitioners as sources for organ transplants. Investigations and undercover recordings revealed doctors confirming the availability of Falun Gong organs, valued for their health. Prisoners of conscience were detained, medically tested, and killed for their hearts, kidneys, and livers. This state-backed operation turned hospitals into killing factories, profiting from human lives. Despite China's denials, evidence from witnesses and researchers shows systematic, government-enabled murder masked as medical advancement. It remains one of the darkest and most brutal crimes of modern China. Now the complete version of the topic. China's murder for organs, live organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners exposed. Across China, hospitals have quietly admitted to a horrifying reality: the live organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. Undercover investigations have captured doctors and hospital staff acknowledging that organs from detained Falun Gong believers were available for transplant. The words came out casually, as if describing medical supplies, not human lives. What these admissions expose is not a local scandal, but a state-engineered system of medical murder. Hospitals, places meant to save lives, were turned into slaughterhouses sanctioned by the Chinese regime. The target: Falun Gong practitioners. Falun Gong, a spiritual discipline based on meditation and moral living, gained massive popularity in China during the 1990s. When its followers began outnumbering Communist Party members, the regime labeled it an enemy. By 1999, a nationwide campaign was launched to eliminate Falun Gong. Millions were arrested, imprisoned, or sent to re-education through labor camps. Inside these facilities, reports began surfacing of medical examinations and blood tests performed on detainees not for their welfare, but to assess organ compatibility. The victims were healthy, disciplined, and young, ideal for organ harvesting. Their belief in peace became their death sentence. The horrifying evidence. Multiple investigations uncovered evidence that leaves little room for doubt. The number of organ transplants in China skyrocketed after the persecution of Falun Gong began. Yet, there was no corresponding increase in voluntary donors. Phone recordings of hospital staff confirmed that Falun Gong prisoners were used as living organ sources. In some conversations, surgeons openly claimed that organs from Falun Gong practitioners were the best because the prisoners did not drink or smoke. Waiting times for organ transplants in China became impossibly short, sometimes just a few days. In every other country, recipients wait months or years. This meant organs were being sourced on demand, a clear sign that living prisoners were being killed for parts. The system of killing. The process was cold, methodical, and state-supported. Detention centers identified Falun Gong practitioners, conducted medical profiling, and maintained databases of their tissue types. When a paying recipient, often a wealthy Chinese elite or foreign transplant tourist, requested an organ, a matching prisoner would be selected. They were sedated but alive when surgeons removed their organs: hearts, kidneys, corneas, and livers. The procedure ensured the organs were fresh. Bodies were immediately cremated to erase evidence. No names, no records, no graves, just ashes of the innocent fueling China's transplant empire. This wasn't rogue behavior. It was an organized trade between hospitals, the military, and the communist state, turning human beings into inventory. A quick request: if you found this podcast interesting so far, I'd appreciate it if you'd give it a like. You'd also be doing us a huge favor if you subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thank you. Profits in blood. China's transplant industry boomed. Hospitals expanded their transplant wings and advertised guaranteed matching organs. Prices soared, hundreds of thousands of dollars for a single liver or heart. Behind this medical prosperity was a genocide disguised as healthcare. Doctors, surgeons, and administrators became participants in a government-sponsored business of death. The denials and lies. The Chinese government has repeatedly denied all allegations, claiming that since 2015 all organs come from voluntary donors. but the data doesn't match. Independent researchers have found that China's transplant numbers are mathematically impossible given the small pool of registered donors. Official figures appear fabricated. Hospitals continue performing transplants at industrial scale, despite a lack of transparency. Every shred of evidence from hospital admissions to survivor testimonies points to one conclusion: China's denials are lies built on the graves of the innocent. The silence of the world. Despite overwhelming evidence, the world's response has been hesitant and weak. Governments issue cautious statements. Human rights organizations release reports. Yet China's hospitals continue to operate. Medical associations, too, have turned a blind eye. Collaboration with Chinese transplant doctors continues at conferences and research institutions. The global medical community has largely failed to confront the fact that Chinese hospitals are participating in mass murder. Silence in the face of such horror is complicity. Witness to the horror. Some survivors have managed to escape and speak out. One Falun Gong practitioner described being subjected to repeated physical exams and organ function tests while in detention, tests that had nothing to do with their health. Another testified that prisoners disappeared overnight, never to return. Guards whispered they had been sent for operation. These accounts align perfectly with the findings of international investigations, a hidden but systematic machinery of death, operating under the mask of modern medicine. The China Tribunal's verdict. In 2020, the Independent China Tribunal, chaired by British barrister Sir Geoffrey Nice KC, delivered its chilling conclusion. Forced organ harvesting has been committed for years throughout China on a significant scale. Falun Gong practitioners have been one and probably the main source of organ supply. This verdict confirmed what survivors and investigators had long claimed: China's hospitals have become killing fields. The tribunal declared the crime a crime against humanity. Yet, even after such a judgment, Beijing faced no real consequences. The true face of China's brutality. China's use of hospitals as instruments of execution and profit exposes the regime's complete moral collapse. Under the Communist Party's rule, even the sanctity of the human body is not spared from political and economic exploitation. Demand for justice. The international community must treat this for what it is: a genocide through medicine. Countries must ban transplant tourism to China and sanction those involved in the trade. Hospitals and universities worldwide should cut ties with Chinese transplant institutions until full transparency is achieved. Justice for the victims of organ harvesting must become a global demand. To ignore it is to abandon the most basic principles of humanity. Sources: The British Medical Journal, BMJ. Concerns grow about forced organ harvesting in China. 2020, provides documented evidence and expert opinions on hospital-level admissions and the lack of ethical transparency in China's transplant system. China Tribunal Final Judgment, 2020, chaired by Sir Geoffrey Nice KC. Independent tribunal findings concluding that forced organ harvesting has been practiced for years throughout China, primarily targeting Falun Gong practitioners. Kilger, David and Mattis, David. Report into allegations of organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners in China. 2006, one of the first comprehensive investigations uncovering the connection between Falun Gong persecution and China's booming transplant industry. Ethan Gutman. The Slaughter, Mass Killings, Organ Harvesting, and China's Secret Solution to its Dissident Problem. Prometheus Books, 2014. A detailed journalistic work based on interviews with survivors, former medical personnel, and Chinese insiders. United Nations Human Rights Office, OCHR, UN experts demand China account for organ harvesting allegations. Documents formal calls by UN human rights experts urging China to allow independent investigation into organ procurement practices. Amnesty International, Falun Gong, reports of torture and organ harvesting in China. Summarizes widespread reports of arbitrary detention, torture, and possible organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience. U.S. Congressional Executive Commission on China, CECC, Annual Report on Human Rights in China. Cites evidence and testimonies linking China's opaque transplant system to ongoing human rights violations against Falun Gong practitioners.